The winds of change blew through Broken Ridge that sweltering summer of 1878, carrying whispers and pointing fingers aimed at the odd woman who lived in the dilapidated cabin at the edge of town. Olivia Vale hadn't asked to be the subject of ridicule, but after 3 years of failed crops, a collapsed marriage, and the death of her parents, the 22-year-old had become something of a local legend, a cautionary tale mothers told their daughters. "There goes hopeless Vale," the townsfolk would mutter as Olivia passed by, her worn boots kicking up dust on the main street. "Everything she touches withers and dies." It wasn't her fault that Thomas Wilder had married her with sweet promises only to abandon her for California gold fever. It wasn't her fault that drought had devastated her small farm for 3 consecutive seasons. It wasn't her fault that influenza had taken her parents within a week of each other the previous winter. But in a frontier town where superstition ran as deep as the wells, Olivia had become a walking omen of misfortune. Hopeless Vale, they called her, and the name stuck like a burr to wool. She kept her chin up as she made her way to the general store, the list of supplies clutched tightly in her hand. The meager coins in her pocket were the last of what she'd earned mending clothes for Mrs. Patterson. She'd have to make them stretch until she could find more work. The bell above the door jingled as she entered, and conversation halted. 3 women gathered near the fabric section fell silent, their eyes following her movements. Mr. Duncan, the shopkeeper, offered a tight smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Just the essentials today, Mr. Duncan," Olivia said, placing her list on the counter. "Of course, Miss Vale." His voice was polite but distant as he began gathering her items. The store door swung open again, the bell announcing a new arrival. The atmosphere shifted instantly, warmth flooding the previously chilled air. Boots thudded against the wooden floor, spurs jingling with each step. "Afternoon, ladies," came a deep, honeyed voice. "Mr. Duncan." Olivia didn't need to turn around to know who had entered. Everyone in Broken Ridge knew Finn Morrison, the ranch foreman from Silver Creek Ranch. His reputation preceded him. Hardworking, fair-minded, and handsome enough to make even the married women of town adjust their bonnets when he rode in. "Mr. Morrison, what brings you into town today?" Mr. Duncan's tone had brightened considerably. "Supply run for the ranch, and I'm looking to hire some help for the season. Cattle drive coming up next month, and we're short-handed." Olivia kept her eyes fixed on the counter as Mr. Duncan continued gathering her items. She'd never spoken to Finn Morrison directly, but she'd seen him around town plenty. He was probably 30 or so, with sun-bronzed skin and eyes the color of a summer sky. Not that she'd noticed particularly. "That'll be 83 cents, Miss Vale," Mr. Duncan announced, pulling her from her thoughts. Olivia counted out her coins carefully, aware of the eyes on her back. She was 7 cents short. "I'll have to put the sugar back," she said quietly. "Allow me," came that same deep voice now directly beside her. Startled, Olivia looked up to find Finn Morrison standing at her elbow, extending a dime toward the shopkeeper. "That's not necessary, Mr. Morrison," she said stiffly. "I insist," he replied, his blue eyes meeting hers directly. "Consider it a loan if your pride requires it." The women by the fabric were watching with undisguised interest. Olivia could almost hear tomorrow's gossip. Hopeless Vale trying to bewitch poor Finn Morrison now. "Fine." She took a step back. "Thank you for the loan. I'll repay it when I can." Mr. Duncan completed the transaction, bagging her purchases with uncharacteristic care under Finn's watchful eye. "You're the Vale woman, aren't you?" Finn asked as she gathered her parcels. "From the old Crowley place east of town." "I am," she replied cautiously. "I hear you're good with a needle and thread." Olivia nodded, uncertain where this was leading. "We need someone at the ranch to mend work clothes and linens. Regular pay 1 day a week. Interested?" The offer hung in the air between them. Regular work meant regular money. Money meant food and keeping her small homestead. Yet suspicion clouded her thoughts. "Why would you offer me work when half the town thinks I'm cursed?" she asked bluntly, lowering her voice so only he could hear. A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. I don't much care for what half the town thinks, Miss Vale. I care about finding someone who can stitch a straight seam. He leaned in slightly. Besides, I've never been one to believe in curses. The women by the fabric were practically straining to overhear the conversation. Olivia felt a small, rebellious thrill at their obvious curiosity. Very well, Mr. Morrison, when would you like me to start? Tomorrow. I'll send a wagon for you at 7. He tipped his hat. Good day, Miss Vale. Olivia gathered her parcels and left the store, her heart beating a little faster than usual. As the door closed behind her, she heard one of the women say, "Poor Finn Morrison, doesn't know what he's getting himself into with hopeless Vale." The next morning, Olivia rose before dawn. She dressed in her best work dress, faded blue calico, mended carefully at the elbows, and tied her unruly auburn hair back with a ribbon. Her reflection in the small mirror showed a face too thin, with dark circles under green eyes that had once been described as lively. 3 hard years had stolen the softness from her cheeks and the easy smile from her lips. The wagon arrived precisely at 7, driven by a boy of about 16 who introduced himself as Tommy, one of the ranch hands. He was polite enough, if a bit reserved, as they made the journey to Silver Creek Ranch. "Mr. Morrison said to bring you straight to the main house," Tommy explained as they passed under an arch bearing the ranch's brand, a stylized S with a curved line beneath it. The ranch sprawled across the valley, a collection of well-maintained buildings surrounding a 2-story main house. Cattle dotted the distant pastures, and several men on horseback were visible moving among the herds. Tommy brought the wagon to a stop outside the main house and helped Olivia down. "Mrs. Mathers is inside. She's the housekeeper." Olivia straightened her dress and made her way up the steps. Before she could knock, the door swung open to reveal a plump, gray-haired woman with kind eyes. "You must be Miss Vale. I'm Mrs. Mathers." She opened the door wider. Come in, come in." "Mr. Morrison said you'd be handling our mending. Lord knows we need the help." Mrs. Mathers led Olivia to a sunny room at the back of the house, where baskets of clothing and linens awaited attention. "The men are terrible hard on their clothes," Mrs. Mathers explained. "And with 20 ranch hands, it's more than I can manage myself. You'll find everything you need in that trunk: thread, needles, patches." Olivia surveyed the work before her. "I'll get started right away. Mr. Morrison said to make sure you had a proper lunch, so I'll call you when it's ready." With that, Mrs. Mathers bustled away, leaving Olivia alone with her task. The work was straightforward enough, mending tears in shirts and pants, patching worn elbows, replacing buttons. Olivia fell into a rhythm, finding comfort in the familiar task. The morning passed quickly. She was so absorbed in her work that she didn't hear the footsteps until a shadow fell across her sewing. "I see you've made yourself at home." Olivia looked up to find Finn Morrison standing in the doorway, hat in hand. The morning sun streaming through the window caught in his sandy hair, turning it golden. He'd cleaned up since yesterday, his jaw freshly shaven. "Mr. Morrison," she acknowledged, setting aside the shirt she was mending, "I hope my work meets your expectations." He crossed the room and examined a pair of pants she'd already repaired, turning them over in his large, calloused hands. "Better than expected, actually. Most of these clothes haven't looked this good since they were new." Olivia felt an unfamiliar warmth in her cheeks at the praise. "Thank you." "I'm curious, Miss Vale," he said, settling into a chair across from her. "How does someone with your skill end up with a nickname like Hopeless?" Olivia's hands stilled on the fabric. "You've heard that, then. It's a small town, I hear most things." She met his gaze levelly. "Then you've also heard about my failed crops, my absent husband, and my dead parents?" "I have," he admitted. "Though I tend to attribute crop failures to drought rather than curses. As for husbands who run off to California, well, gold fever has broken many homes." "And the influenza that took my parents, was that just bad luck too?" "A tragic illness that took many lives last winter," he replied gently. "Not a curse, Miss Vale, just the harsh realities of frontier life." Olivia looked down at her hands, suddenly ashamed of her defensive tone. "I apologize, Mr. Morrison. It's been a long time since anyone in Broken Ridge spoke to me without pity or suspicion." "No apology necessary." He rose from his chair. "Mrs. Mathers tells me lunch is ready. Will you join us?" The meal was simple but hearty: stew, fresh bread, and apple pie for dessert. Mrs. Mathers kept the conversation flowing, and for the first time in years, Olivia felt almost normal, almost part of something again. After lunch, she returned to her work, finishing shortly before sunset. When she'd completed the last piece, she found Finn waiting to drive her home personally. "You don't need to trouble yourself," she protested. "Surely one of the ranch hands." "No trouble," he interrupted, helping her onto the wagon seat. "I'm heading that way anyhow." The ride back to her cabin was quiet at first, the silence broken only by the steady clip-clop of the horses' hooves and the creaking of the wagon wheels. "Same time next week?" Finn asked as they approached her property. "Yes, that would be fine." She hesitated, then added, "Thank you, Mr. Morrison, for the work and for not believing in curses." He smiled then, a genuine smile that transformed his face. "You know what I think, Miss Vale? I think people in that town have been calling you by the wrong name." The wagon rolled to a stop in front of her cabin. "What do you mean?" she asked. "They call you hopeless." He jumped down from the wagon and came around to help her down. His hands were strong and warm at her waist as he lifted her effortlessly. "But I look at you surviving, working, holding your head up despite everything, and I don't see hopeless at all." His voice dropped slightly. "I see hope itself." The words hung between them in the gathering twilight. Olivia felt something stir in her chest, something she thought had died along with her parents, something she'd believed had abandoned her along with Thomas. "Good night, Mr. Morrison," she said softly, stepping back from his hands. "Finn," he corrected. "Call me Finn." "Good night, Finn." "Good night, Olivia." As his wagon disappeared down the road, Olivia stood outside her small cabin, watching until the dust settled. For the first time in 3 years, she felt the faintest flicker of something dangerous possibility. The weeks passed, and Olivia's Thursday visits to Silver Creek Ranch became the highlight of her otherwise solitary existence. The pay was fair, the work satisfying, and the company. The company was something she tried not to think about too much. Finn was often absent during her first few visits, occupied with ranch business. But gradually, he began to appear more frequently, bringing her tea in the afternoon, joining her and Mrs. Mathers for lunch, or simply sitting in the same room reviewing ledgers while she sewed. On her 6th visit, he appeared in the doorway with an unusual request. "Olivia, I need your help with something a bit different today." She looked up from her mending. "Oh, follow me." Curious, Olivia set aside her work and followed him through the house to a room she hadn't entered before: his study. A large desk dominated the space, but what caught her attention was the item laid out on it: a large piece of leather, carefully cut in the shape of a vest. "My father made this for me when I was 16, Finn explained, running his fingers over the material. "Said every ranch foreman needs a proper leather vest. The seams are coming apart after all these years." He glanced at her. "I was hoping you might be able to repair it." Olivia approached the desk and examined the vest. The leather was fine quality, worn soft with age and use. The stitching along the sides had indeed begun to unravel. "I can fix this," she said confidently. "Do you have an awl and leather needle?" He produced the tools from a drawer along with heavy waxed thread. "Will these do?" She nodded and set to work. Finn settled into a chair across the desk, watching her hands as she carefully repaired the worn seams. "You never talk about yourself," she observed after a comfortable silence had stretched between them. "Not much to tell," he shrugged. "Born in Texas, father was a rancher, learned the trade from him, came north after the war, worked my way up from ranch hand to foreman. No wife, family." A shadow crossed his face. "Was engaged once, back in '73, influenza took her before the wedding." Olivia's hands stilled. "I'm sorry." "It was a long time ago." His gaze met hers. What about you? Will your husband be coming back from California? She returned her attention to the stitching. Thomas Wilder is not my husband anymore. I received divorce papers a year ago. He has a new wife now, a banker's daughter from San Francisco. I see. Finn was quiet for a moment. Do you miss him? I miss who I thought he was, she answered honestly. I miss the dreams we had. But the man himself, she shook her head. No, I don't miss him at all. When she finished repairing the vest, Finn tried it on immediately. It fit him perfectly, accentuating the breadth of his shoulders. Good as new, he said appreciatively, his fingers tracing the even stitches. Better even. Their eyes met across the room and something unspoken passed between them. Olivia looked away first. I should get back to the other mending, she said, gathering the tools, of course. But he made no move to step aside from the doorway, and when she approached, they stood for a moment in close proximity. Thank you, he said softly. Not just for the vest. You're welcome, she replied, equally quiet. Not just for the vest. In town, Olivia began to notice a subtle shift. While some still whispered hopeless Vale as she passed, others greeted her with cautious nods. Mrs. Patterson brought her more sewing work. Mr. Duncan no longer watched her like she might pocket his merchandise. Being associated with Silver Creek Ranch and by extension, with Finn Morrison had begun to change her standing in Broken Ridge. She wasn't sure how she felt about that. On a scorching day in late July, Olivia arrived at the ranch to find unusual activity. Cowboys were saddling horses, loading wagons, and moving cattle into a large holding pen near the main corral. The cattle drive starts tomorrow, Mrs. Mathers explained when Olivia entered the house. They'll be taking 3,000 head to the railhead at Junction City. Be gone at least 3 weeks. Olivia felt a peculiar hollowness at the news. I see. Will you still need me to come while they're gone? Oh yes, dear. There's plenty to do before they leave, and we'll want everything ready for when they return. The older woman gave her a knowing look. Finn asked specifically that you continue your regular days. As if conjured by his name, Finn appeared in the kitchen doorway. He looked different today, more the cowboy than the foreman in well-worn chaps, a bandana around his neck and his hat shadowing his features. Olivia, I was hoping to catch you before you got started. He gestured toward the door. Can I have a word? Outside, the ranch was a flurry of organized chaos. Finn led her away from the main activity toward a quiet spot near the corral fence. I'll be gone for about 3 weeks, he said without preamble. The drive to Junction City is usually straightforward, but with the drought this year, we'll need to take a longer route to find water. Mrs. Mathers mentioned it, Olivia replied. I hope it goes smoothly. He studied her face for a moment. I've made arrangements with Tommy to drive you home each Thursday, and I've told Mrs. Mathers to pay you a little extra while I'm gone. We'll need plenty of new shirts and such when we return, trail-worn as we'll be. That's very thoughtful. Finn shifted his weight, uncharacteristically hesitant. There's something else, something I've been meaning to ask. He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small envelope. Would you write to me while I'm on the drive? Letters can be sent to Junction City, care of the Western Union office. The request surprised her. You want me to write to you, only if you're willing. He held out the envelope. I've included some paper and stamps. Just tell me how things are in Broken Ridge or about your day. Anything, really. Olivia took the envelope, her fingers brushing his. I can do that. Relief washed over his features. Good, that's good. A shout came from the direction of the main house. One of the ranch hands was waving to get Finn's attention. I should go, he said reluctantly. We've still got plenty to do before dawn, of course. He started to turn away, then stopped. In a swift movement that caught her entirely by surprise, he took her hand and raised it to his lips, pressing a brief kiss to her knuckles. Take care, Olivia Vale. I'll be thinking of you. Before she could respond, he was striding away, calling out instructions to the waiting cowboys. Olivia stood frozen, her hand still tingling from the warmth of his lips. That night, by lamplight, she wrote her first letter to Finn Morrison. It was awkward at first. She hadn't written a personal letter in years. but gradually the words began to flow. She told him about the wild roses blooming near her cabin, about the blue jay that had built a nest in her elm tree, about the small vegetable garden she'd started with seeds Mrs. Mathers had given her. She made no mention of the way her hand had trembled when he kissed it, or how she'd replayed the moment in her mind all the way home. Some things, Olivia decided, were better left unwritten. The 3 weeks of Finn's absence stretched endlessly. Olivia continued her Thursday visits to the ranch, finding comfort in Mrs. Mather's cheerful company and Tommy's increasingly friendly chatter during the wagon rides. But the main house felt different without Finn's presence, quieter, emptier somehow. She wrote to him faithfully every few days, each letter a little longer, a little more open than the last. She found herself sharing thoughts she'd never spoken aloud, her fears about the future, memories of happier times with her parents, even her tentative dreams of someday restoring her small farm to productivity. 2 weeks into the cattle drive, a letter arrived for Olivia, her name written in a bold, masculine hand that made her heart skip. She waited until evening to open it, savoring the anticipation. Finn's letter was everything she hadn't known she needed: warm, thoughtful, and unexpectedly poetic in its descriptions of the trail. He wrote of star-filled nights and dawn breaking over distant mountains, of the rhythm of the herd and the camaraderie of the cowboys. And between the lines, in words not quite said, she sensed a longing that matched her own. "I find myself looking east each evening," he wrote near the end, "knowing you're somewhere beyond those hills, perhaps looking at the same stars. It's a comfort somehow, Olivia, to think we share the same sky." The day before Finn was due to return, disaster struck Broken Ridge. A lightning storm ignited a fire in the dry forest east of town, and strong winds drove it toward the outlying farms, including Olivia's cabin. She was in town when the alarm sounded, having just delivered mended clothing to Mrs. Patterson. The street erupted in activity as men organized a bucket brigade and families prepared to evacuate if necessary. "Miss Vale," Sheriff Donovan called, striding toward her. "The fire's heading straight for your place. You'd better come with us. We're sending men out that way to try to save what buildings we can." The ride to her property was tense, the sky darkening with smoke as they approached. When they crested the final hill, Olivia's heart sank. Flames were already licking at the edge of her field, advancing rapidly toward her cabin and barn. "It's too close," one of the men shouted. "We can't stop it, my home," Olivia whispered, watching as the fire drew nearer to the only thing she had left in the world. And then, like an apparition through the smoke, came riders, a dozen or more, driving their horses hard. At their head was a figure she would recognize anywhere. "Finn," she breathed. The Silver Creek Cowboys thundered past the sheriff's wagon, heading straight for the advancing fire. Under Finn's direction, they split into groups, some using shovels and wet blankets to beat back flames, others bringing water from the nearby creek to douse the cabin roof and walls. Olivia leaped from the wagon and ran toward the action. A strong arm caught her before she could get too close to the flames. "Whoa there, Miss Vale," said a cowboy she recognized from the ranch. "Boss would have my hide if I let you get hurt. But my home, we're doing everything we can. Best help would be to keep the water coming." For 2 hours, they fought the fire as it tried to claim Olivia's small homestead. The men from town joined the Silver Creek Cowboys, working together to create fire breaks and save what buildings they could. Through the chaos, Olivia caught glimpses of Finn shouting orders, working alongside his men, his face blackened with soot and grim with determination. When the wind finally shifted, pushing the fire back toward the already burned forest, a ragged cheer went up from the exhausted firefighters. Olivia's cabin stood scorched but intact. The barn had lost part of its roof, but the structure remained sound. Her field was a charred wasteland, but the buildings and, more importantly, the well and root cellar containing her winter preserves had been saved. As the immediate danger passed, Finn finally made his way to where Olivia stood, distributing water to the tired men. His face was streaked with soot, his clothes singed in places, but his eyes were clear and focused entirely on her. "Are you all right?" They both asked the question simultaneously, then shared a small, exhausted laugh. "I'm fine," Olivia assured him. "Thanks to you and your men, how did you know you weren't due back until tomorrow?" "We pushed hard the last few days," Finn explained, accepting the dipper of water she offered. "Made good time. We were just coming into the valley when we saw the smoke." He looked around at the smoldering landscape. "Couldn't let it take your place, Olivia, not when we were close enough to help." She wanted to thank him, but the words seemed wholly inadequate for what he'd done. Instead, she reached out and took his soot-blackened hand in hers, squeezing it tightly. The gesture seemed to communicate what she couldn't say, because Finn's expression softened, his eyes never leaving hers as he returned the pressure of her fingers. Sheriff Donovan approached, breaking the moment. "Miss Vale, we've got men who'll stay and watch for flare-ups tonight. Don't think you should sleep here, though smoke damage inside, and there's always a chance the wind could shift again." Before Olivia could respond, Finn spoke up. "She'll come to Silver Creek. We've plenty of room, and Mrs. Mathers will be glad for the company." The sheriff nodded, apparently finding nothing unusual in the arrangement. "Good, that's settled then. Morrison, your boys deserve medals for getting here when they did. Don't think there'd be anything left otherwise." As the sheriff moved away to organize the watch rotation, Finn turned back to Olivia. "Only if you're comfortable with it," he said quietly, "but I'd rest easier knowing you were somewhere safe tonight." "Thank you," she replied simply. "I'd like that." At Silver Creek, Mrs. Mathers fussed over Olivia like a mother hen, providing a hot bath, clean clothes, and a hearty meal despite the late hour. Finn disappeared to oversee the settling of the cattle and men after their hasty return, and Olivia didn't see him again that night. The next morning, she woke in an unfamiliar but comfortable bed, sunlight streaming through lace curtains. For a moment, she was disoriented, until memories of the previous day flooded back the fire, the desperate fight to save her home, Finn appearing like an answer to a prayer she hadn't dared to make. After dressing in clothes Mrs. Mathers had loaned her, Olivia made her way downstairs. The house was quiet, though she could hear activity outside the normal sounds of ranch life resuming after yesterday's drama. She found Finn in the kitchen, sitting alone at the table with a cup of coffee and the remains of breakfast. He'd cleaned up, his hair still damp from washing, dressed in a fresh shirt that she recognized as one she'd mended weeks earlier. He looked up as she entered, his face breaking into a smile that made her heart flutter. "Good morning," he greeted her. "How did you sleep?" "Better than I expected, considering." She took the seat across from him. "I should get back to my place soon, see what needs doing." "I sent men out at first light," Finn replied, pouring coffee into a cup for her. "They report the cabin's sound, though it'll need some cleaning inside. Barn roof will need repair. I've got lumber we can spare and hands who can help with the work." Olivia wrapped her fingers around the warm cup. "Finn, I can't possibly repay you for all this. I'm not asking for repayment." "Then why?" The question had been building since yesterday. "Why go to such lengths for me?" He set his cup down carefully. "Do you really not know?" The intensity in his blue eyes made her breath catch. "Tell me anyway." Finn reached across the table, his hand covering hers. "Because from the moment I saw you in Duncan's store, trying to hold your head high while the whole town whispered behind your back, something in me recognized something in you." His voice grew softer. "Because every Thursday for months now, I've found reasons to be at the house when you're here. Because your letters made 3 weeks on the trail feel like 3 months." His fingers tightened around hers. "Because you're not hopeless, Olivia Vale. You're my hope." The words hung in the sun-dappled kitchen, more powerful than any declaration of love she'd ever heard. And wasn't that what this was? A declaration wrapped in honest words instead of pretty phrases. "I've been afraid," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "Afraid to believe in anything good again, afraid to trust that something might actually last. I know. His thumb traced circles on the back of her hand. But I'm not asking you to trust all at once, just enough to give us a chance. Olivia looked at their joined hands, then back to his face open, honest, waiting for her answer. Yes, she said simply. Yes, I'd like that very much. The slow smile that spread across his face was like the sunrise, warm, illuminating, full of promise. He stood, tugging her gently to her feet and drawing her around the table until they stood face to face. May I? He asked, his free hand lifting to hover near her cheek. She nodded, holding her breath as his palm cupped her face, his touch reverent. Slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, Finn lowered his head until his lips met hers in a kiss so tender it brought tears to her eyes. When they parted, he rested his forehead against hers. I've wanted to do that since I watched you ride away after your second Thursday here, he confessed. Olivia laughed softly. I've wanted you to since you kissed my hand before the cattle drive. His arms encircled her waist, drawing her closer. We have time now, time for everything. And in that moment, Olivia believed in the possibility of a future where Hopeless Vale was nothing but a distant memory, replaced by something much more beautiful. Olivia Morrison, wife of the man who had seen hope where everyone else saw only despair. The days following the fire were busy ones. True to his word, Finn provided materials and men to help repair Olivia's cabin and barn. He was there himself most days, working alongside his cowboys to restore her small homestead. Word of their developing relationship spread quickly through Broken Ridge. Some whispered that Finn Morrison must be bewitched to court a woman with such bad luck. Others, who had witnessed his determined leadership during the fire, began to reconsider their opinions of Olivia Vale. Mrs. Patterson was the first to speak openly in her defense. That girl sat up 3 nights straight mending my Henry's wedding suit when I thought it was ruined beyond repair, she declared loudly in the general store. And did it for half what she could have charged. Doesn't sound like someone who brings bad luck to me. Gradually, the whispers of Hopeless Vale faded, replaced by respectful nods and even occasional smiles. Olivia found more sewing work coming her way from town, and for the first time in years, felt herself becoming part of the community again rather than its cautionary tale through it all. Finn was her constant, her anchor. Their courtship progressed with the steady certainty of people who had already seen each other at their most vulnerable and found strength there. They shared meals, conversations that stretched long into evening, and increasingly tender moments away from prying eyes. As summer gave way to autumn, Olivia's garden, replanted after the fire with help from Mrs. Mathers, yielded a modest harvest. The night she presented Finn with a pie made from her own pumpkins, he took her hands across the table of her small cabin. I have something to ask you, he said, his expression serious. Something I've been thinking about for a while now. Olivia's heart quickened. Yes, winter's coming and this cabin gets mighty cold, or so Mrs. Mathers tells me. His thumbs traced patterns on her palms. I was thinking. Maybe you shouldn't spend it alone. What are you suggesting, Finn Morrison? She asked, though she knew hoped what was coming. He smiled, reached into his pocket, and placed a small velvet box on the table between them. I'm suggesting you become Mrs. Morrison before the first snow. I'm suggesting you let me build you a life where you never doubt your worth again. I'm suggesting, he opened the box to reveal a delicate gold ring with a single pearl, that you marry me, Olivia Vale, because I love you more than I ever thought possible. Tears sprang to her eyes as she looked from the ring to the face of the man who had changed everything. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I will marry you. They were married on a crisp October day with golden leaves carpeting the ground and the scent of wood smoke in the air. The ceremony was held at Silver Creek Ranch, with Mrs. Mathers sniffling happily in the front row and most of Broken Ridge in attendance, including many who had once crossed the street to avoid Hopeless Vale. Olivia wore a gown of ivory silk that she had made herself, with Mrs. Patterson's help for the intricate beadwork. Finn looked impossibly handsome in a new black suit, his blue eyes never leaving her face as they spoke their vows. "I promise to be your shelter in every storm," he told her, his voice carrying clearly to every corner of the room. "Your companion in every joy, your hope when the way seems dark." "And I promise," Olivia replied, her heart so full she could barely speak, "to be your partner in all things. To face whatever comes at your side. To remind you always that love can bloom even in the most unlikely places." As Finn slipped the gold band onto her finger to join her engagement ring, she knew with absolute certainty that hopeless Vale was gone forever, replaced by a woman who had found her place in the world as Olivia Morrison, wife of the man who had taught her to hope again. 5 years later, on a warm spring evening, Finn and Olivia Morrison sat on the porch of the Silver Creek Ranch house, watching their 3-year-old daughter Hope chasing fireflies in the gathering twilight. Olivia's hand rested on the gentle swell of her belly, where their second child grew steadily. "Hope, don't go too far," Finn called, his voice indulgent as the little girl giggled and darted after the glowing insects. "She's fearless like her father," Olivia observed, leaning her head against her husband's shoulder, "and determined like her mother." Finn pressed a kiss to her temple. "I was thinking today about how much has changed since that day in Duncan's store." Olivia smiled at the memory. "When you gallantly paid for my sugar? When I met the woman who would change my life." His hand covered hers where it rested on her stomach. "Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I hadn't gone to town that day. I like to think we would have found each other anyway," Olivia replied. "Some things are just meant to be." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, watching as Hope triumphantly captured a firefly in her cupped hands, her delighted laugh carrying across the yard. "Mama, Papa, look," she called, carefully bringing her prize to show them. Finn lifted the little girl onto his lap and they all leaned in to observe the firefly's gentle glow in her palms. "Beautiful," Finn murmured, but he was looking at his wife and daughter, not the insect. "We should let it go now," Olivia suggested gently, "so it can find its way home." Hope nodded solemnly and opened her hands. The firefly lingered for a moment on her small palm before taking flight, its light pulsing as it rose into the darkening sky. "It's happy now," Hope declared with the certainty of childhood. "Yes, sweetheart," Olivia agreed, brushing a strand of hair sandy like her father's from her daughter's face. "Everyone deserves to find their way home." Later, with Hope tucked into bed and the house quiet around them, Finn and Olivia stood by their bedroom window, looking out at the starlit ranch that had become the center of their shared life. "Do you ever miss your cabin?" Finn asked, his arms encircling her from behind, hands gentle on her growing belly. "Sometimes," she admitted. "But not for the reasons you might think. I miss it because it reminds me of how far we've come, how much we've built together." He turned her in his arms, studying her face in the soft lamplight. "Any regrets? About marrying the foreman instead of some fancy town gentleman?" Olivia laughed and reached up to touch his face, tracing the familiar lines that 5 years had deepened slightly around his eyes and mouth. "My only regret is that we wasted so many Thursdays with me just mending your clothes when we could have been doing this." She rose on tiptoe to kiss him soundly. When they parted, Finn's eyes were dark with a love that still took her breath away. "No time was wasted," he said softly. "Every moment brought us here. And here," his hand spread protectively over their unborn child, "is exactly where we're meant to be." As they held each other in the quiet night, Olivia thought about the strange, winding path that had led her from hopeless Vale to this moment of perfect contentment. Through drought and fire, through whispers and scorn, through loss and renewal, she had found her way to Finn Morrison, the man who had looked at her and seen not a curse, but a blessing. Not an omen of misfortune, but a promise of joy, not hopeless, but hope itself.